The balance of power in the One Piece world that we were told about was a lie. Supposedly, the Marines and the Shichibukai together counterbalanced the four emperors. But in actuality, this stalemate was nothing but a charade, with the vast majority of players completely unaware that the true strength of the world government was far greater than the pieces they were showing on the board. In reality, the world government has always hidden its true strength, and has always been capable of putting an end to the entire pirate world whenever it so chose. Because behind the world government are the Celestial Dragons, and the Celestial Dragons look down on the balance of power from high over in the heavens, all along completely safe and secure with their own hidden collection of powerful forces, who, if brought down to the battlefield, would completely smash any illusion of a balance of power. It was never just the Marines and the Shichibukai versus the Yonko. What we didn't know about were the Gorosei, and the God's Knights, and of course Imu himself, the literal god of the world. And altogether they swing the balance of power so absurdly in favor of the world government that it hammers in the entire point of the story of One Piece, the entire point of the story of Luffy, that all of the Yonko and the revolutionaries, they never had a hope of dethroning the Celestial Dragons. Rather, it has taken 800 years for the time to finally come for one man to actually be able to fulfill the will of D. It will take the return of Joy Boy, the reawakening of the Nika fruit, and the rise of a true pirate king who can unite the entire planet. All of these factors together to finally overthrow the world government and the Celestial Dragons. Nothing less. So could the Celestial Dragons have gotten involved in the balance of power themselves and ended the Yonko decades ago? Undeniably yes, as I will explain in this video. Why didn't they? Because now we have a true understanding of how the balance of power actually works, and the real motivations behind Imu, the Gorosei, and the Celestial Dragons. Before we get into that, to begin with, let's look at the simple fact that all of the world government's forces combined could have completely obliterated all of the Yonko's forces combined from the start. Because what we're being shown now is that the Marines and Shichibukai were never actually the full power of the world government. They were just the tip of the iceberg that the Celestial Dragons used as their proxy to maintain control over the Blue Sea. The Celestial Dragons have their own forces that they literally don't bother deploying to deal with Blue Sea conflicts. The God's Knights, the 5 immortal Gorosei, and even Imu himself, very likely the most powerful character in history. The reasons the Celestial Dragons don't use their own forces is complicated, but we'll get into that in the next section of the video. What matters here is just establishing that if we apply some basic thinking, it becomes immediately clear that the world government most certainly could have eradicated all 4 Yonko empires at any point, if the Celestial Dragons themselves had decided to marshal all their forces and combine them with the Marines and the Shichibukai to bring the full, complete strength of the world government down on the pirates. Think about it. Gorosei Saturn alone has been portrayed to be at least comparable to an admiral, and many believe Saturn to be the weakest of the Gorosei. On the other end of the spectrum, Gorosei Warkiri, who I personally believe is the strongest of the Gorosei, as explained in this video, has already shown far more impressive Conqueror's haki than even Kaido and Big Mom. In fairly clear one-to-one comparisons, Warkiri flexing his haki is very blatantly on a completely different scale and is far more forceful than even the 2 Yonko, which would honestly make sense as the Gorosei at this point seem like ancient primordial forces who have ruled the world for possibly centuries. Kaido and Big Mom are like children in comparison. Now I know people may think it's too soon to make that assumption, and that's totally understandable. If you don't personally agree with the idea of a Gorosei being as strong or even stronger than a Yonko, that's fine. This is all speculation at the moment, so to make this discussion extremely fair, let's actually be really cautious with our estimate, and just say that each Gorosei is roughly comparable to an admiral like Kizaru, give or take. Meaning that if the world government at one point, like pre-time skip, decided to just go on a warpath and take on all 4 Yonko empires at once, then the full forces the world government could have assembled between the 3 admirals, plus Fleet Admiral Sengoku and Garp, and the 5 Gorosei, would have been literally 10 characters, at least admiral level, on their side. That is fucking insane. The Yonko would have literally 0 chance no matter how you personally scale it. Now you might be saying, Morge, hold on, you can't say that objectively. Power scaling is open to interpretation, your views aren't absolute, and you would definitely be right. Except in this case, the disparity is so ridiculously extreme that pretty much any power scaling interpretation that you have, it would still be obvious that the Yonko have zero chance. I'll open it up to every avenue of interpretation. So if you personally think that the Yonko are a bit stronger than admirals on average, well then 4 Yonko would still be clearly outmatched by 10 admiral level characters. Now let's say you think the Yonko are way stronger than admirals to the point that 1 Yonko is equal to 2 admirals. Now, I personally think this is kind of insane, considering Whitebeard had difficulty against each admiral individually, and Big Mom struggled 1v2 against just Kid and Law, which would mean she has zero chance against 2 admirals at the same time. But hey look, if you think 1 Yonko is equal to 2 admirals, well then even then, they still get completely crushed by the world government, because 4 Yonko still cannot defeat 10 admirals. They're just too outnumbered. And if you want to get really crazy and say that, you know what, each Yonko is equal to 3 admirals, and if we want to pretend that Whitebeard wouldn't just immediately die of a heart attack, then guess what? Even then the Yonko still lose terribly, because in that case, I haven't even talked about Emu yet, and Emu could just take one of the Yonko. As Emu is the god of the world, the reigning king for 800 years, and the most likely final boss of the story, he is certainly not losing to a Yonko. Meaning that leaves 3 Yonko having to fight 10 admiral level opponents, and they obviously lose. Even in the most generous interpretation of Yonko's strength, it's just too overwhelming in terms of numbers. No matter how you slice it, if the Celestial Dragons actually got involved against the Yonko, then the Yonko would have been finished. Now you might be saying, but Morge, the Yonko all have commanders, can't they help out? Well, the Marines also have literally scores and scores of Vice Admirals and the Shichibukai. And even if we say that, well, what if all the Shichibukai break their contracts and quit on the spot? Well, then there's still the entire God's Knights, plus CP0 as a bonus. Who knows how many Yonko commanders Old Man Shanks alone would take down, let alone the rest of the God's Knights, plus CP0, plus all the hordes of Vice Admirals. The Yonko commanders would be just as fucked as their captains. Even beyond all that, just in terms of sheer numbers, the world government has several magnitudes of more soldiers than even all the combined Yonko forces. Plus they have squadrons of pacifistas, plus they have far superior technology in general. Like, really stack up everything the world government could hypothetically do if they wanted, and the 4 empires never would have a chance. So then why? Why, if it's so easy, did the Celestial Dragons never do it? Why do 5 potentially admiral level or maybe even greater forces just sit up on top of the wall and stay out of it all? Or alternatively, why don't they send the God's Knights out to do some pirate hunting the way that they did recently with the Revolutionary Army? To put it simply, it's because the Celestial Dragons never needed to. Because it literally doesn't affect them. We have been reading the entirety of the story exploring the Blue Seas, and so from our perspective, the conflict between the pirates and the Marines is constant and rampant. We see most areas are securely protected by the Marines, but others are overrun by pirates. So we're experiencing a world where things are messy. But the Celestial Dragons live in a different world. Literally, they live up in heaven. Nothing that is happening down below has any bearing on them or their lives. They live in overflowing luxury and excess. They want for nothing, need for nothing. Every single thing they could possibly desire is immediately in their hands. Food, slaves, wives, whatever it is, it's theirs. And if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this every week. And make sure to get your One Piece inspired clothing today in the Morge store. We have hoodies, sweatshirts, and t-shirts. And get your one-of-a-kind puzzle of all major One Piece characters. Link in the description below. See, the true balance of the world actually works like this. The Celestial Dragons are the aristocracy. They have their own kingdom that's perfect. It's heaven. Nothing affects them in this kingdom, and they don't need anything beyond this kingdom. In the outside world, there are commoners. The commoners are the source of the aristocracy's wealth, and the Marines are the police, paid by the aristocracy to control the commoners, and to ensure that a steady stream of wealth continuously flows from the commoners to the aristocracy, in their perfect kingdom. And finally, pirates are like the mafia. They are criminal organizations scattered throughout the land that are in conflict with the police. But they are completely separated from the perfect kingdom. So guess what? The aristocracy, up in their ivory tower, have no reason to give a shit about what's going on between the mafia and the police. The mafia don't even affect them. At not a single point in One Piece has it ever been shown that the activities of pirates has any effect whatsoever on Marijua. Whatever is happening down in the slums of the Blue Seas is irrelevant to them. It's very literally a different world. The Mafia squabbles are simply not an aristocracy problem. The Mafia are literally just the police's problem. That's the police's job to take care of everything down below. Sure, the aristocracy does have its own military forces that are extremely powerful that they could send out to aid the police in eliminating the Mafia, but why would they do that when that's what they created the police to do? That's what they pay the police to do. Just take care of the outside world, clean up the trash, and make sure that funds keep coming to the aristocracy. And for the most part, the police, meaning the Marines, have actually been doing a fine job at that. For 800 years, things have been going smoothly. Sure, in the last 20 or so years, since Roger started the Great Pirate Era, the police have started having some more difficulty keeping the Mafia groups in check, 4 groups in particular, but they're still doing it. And the point is that throughout it all, the aristocracy was still completely untouched and unaffected by the police and Mafia squabbles. The aristocracy's flow of celestial gold, food, slaves, and general luxuries being sent up from the commoners has never been affected. So there's literally never been a reason for the aristocracy to actually get their hands dirty, which is why it's been made very clear that the Celestial Dragons will only come down and take action when they themselves are finally affected by something. The Marineford War never became a threat to them. The police were supposed to do their job and handle the pirates, which they did. If the police had failed, and the pirate uprising continued and bared its fangs up at the Celestial Dragons in heaven, well then that would have been the time for the aristocracy to send in the National Guard, aka the God's Knights and the Gorosei, or in the worst case, Imu himself comes down. The fact that this is how the Celestial Dragons work is demonstrated very clearly. The Whitebeard pirates' assault on Marineford prompted no action from the Celestial Dragons, but in contrast, when the Revolutionary Army actually managed to assault Marijua itself and declare war and cut off their food supply, then, and only then, did the Celestial Dragons actually send the God's Knights after them. That's the line where it's now no longer just a police problem, it's gone past that, the aristocracy are directly affected, so they send their own militia. Same thing at Egghead Island. The Celestial Dragons personally need Vegapunk's Mother Flames, which is why when that goal begins to get away from them, finally Gorosei Saturn takes the battlefield himself for the first time in decades. Same thing with Vegapunk's message. For the first time, something might personally affect the aristocracy and ruin their reputation, which could potentially lead to mass rebellion by the commoners. So now and only now do the rest of the Gorosei actually take the battlefield. The reality is, everything before this, all the actions of the Yonko, Blackbeard, Kaido, Big Mom, Whitebeard, whoever it may have been, nothing they did ever actually got past the police level and became an issue that affected the aristocracy's kingdom itself, which is why they never bothered to get involved. This whole balance of power only ever existed because the aristocracy were never going to step in to get their hands dirty when the problems are too minor and can be contained at the police level. Put simply, even the Yonko never became a big enough problem. Mind you, the Gorosei always kept an eye on the goings-on down below. They were observing and monitoring everything. They showed concern at times, and even they began to eventually feel like, hey, this whole pirate situation down below, it's now kind of starting to get kind of out of hand for the police. Enough that maybe it's approaching that time that we Celestial Dragons have to take action ourselves, which is why they talk about a great cleansing. So the pirate problem was just about getting big enough at the time of the Reverie. But for the most part throughout the series, no matter what the pirates were doing, the Celestial Dragons just told the police to get their shit together and handle the criminals themselves like the police are paid to do. As we see, Imu, the big boss, hasn't even truly considered anyone to be a real threat to him since the Void Century 800 years ago, as he views even the most powerful pirates that have come like Roxy Zebek and Goldie Roger as nothing but empty husks compared to the D-Tribe from centuries back. On top of all this, beyond just not bothering to get their hands dirty for no reason, we can see why the aristocracy choosing to stay out of the criminal problems below was beneficial to them. For one, the existence of pirates is what allowed the aristocracy to extort commoners for money, since the commoners need to pay the police for protection, which goes straight to the Celestial Dragons. I'm sure the Marines would personally like to eliminate all pirates, but the Celestial Dragons probably don't mind the existence of pirates, so long as the pirates provide an excuse for the Celestial Dragons to continue having a source of income. On top of that, the world government and the Celestial Dragons' rule is largely based on image. Yes, the Celestial Dragons could aid the Marines and marshal their full forces to eliminate all pirates, but they also likely don't want the world to see the monsters they really are. There's a reason that only officers above a certain rank are even allowed to see a Gorosei in its demonic form, and that's likely to maintain the Celestial Dragon's image. Imu himself isn't even supposed to exist. So while Imu taking the battlefield alongside the Gorosei and all the Marine Admirals would likely spell complete annihilation for all pirates, it would also cause all trust in the world government to collapse, and the aristocracy would suddenly have to do extreme damage control, maybe even having to deal with irreversible damage to its image. So as you can see, the balance of power was a lie. Yes, it does technically exist, but it's not the end-all be-all conflict for control over the world. Rather, it's literally just the ongoing squabble between criminals and a police force that is working to keep a steady source of income flowing to the aristocracy above it. If things ever truly got out of hand for the police, then shit would get real, as the aristocracy's personal militia would come down from above to aid the police and end things once and for all. There's a reason this aristocracy's been in charge for 800 years, and there's a reason that only the reawakening of Joy Boy has a hope of dethroning it. The whole point is that there was never a time before Luffy's rise that the Celestial Dragons were ever in real danger, because there's truly only one man who can bring the dawn. So let me know what you think the final allied force will be that will actually be able to take down Imu, the Gorosei, the God's Knights, the Marines, the Seraphim, and CP0 in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like and subscribe. And you can get my extended thoughts on what I think the final alliance to defeat the world government will look like in my weekly podcast by supporting me on Patreon, link in the description below.